I wanna be free.
Hey, welcome to the Glen Gauer podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. God is not done with you. That's right. As a matter of fact, he might just be getting started. This is what we can take away from the movie Fr Stu. Fr Stu was a man who certainly didn't become a Christian until later in life. Now, I've seen this movie twice, and here's what I love about the movie. It was real. There wasn't anything superficial about Fr Stu. In other words, they let it all hang out. And he wasn't, his character in the movie at least, he wasn't scared to talk about his past. He had nothing to hide. He was not superficial at all. And the movie portrayed him as a normal guy who God called to do his work. I loved this other part where Fr Stu represents real masculinity in a church that I deem is way too feminized. Think about it. How many priests do you know that are really masculine? I asked my brothers probably 8 years ago, hey, how many priests in our diocese do you know that's really masculine, like you and me and our family? And he said, none. I said, well, there are a few. I started naming a couple, and he said, yeah, that's true, but not many. You see, I think Fr Stu is exactly who we need in today's church. Real masculinity equals real leadership. So a little bit about Fr Stu. Now, the movie is a movie based on his life. Not everything in the movie is true, but generally it is. He was born in 1963 in Seattle, and his family moved to Montana. He loved wrestling, football, and became a boxer. So much where in 1985, he won the Golden Glove heavyweight title in Montana. Well, he had an issue with his jaw, and they needed to do surgery on it. There was infection in it, and his doctor said, you're done. So his mom sort of persuaded him, I guess it was his mom, to move to Los Angeles and become a movie star. This is a great story. So he does that. He goes to Los Angeles and tries to make it a movie. He actually lands a couple spots in TV commercials. And I think he might have landed a spot or two in a soap opera. I'm not even sure. But in his words, he thought Hollywood was seedy, and he decided to get out. Now, one thing about Fr Stu is, as I was reading on his life, is he loved people. He loved talking to people. He just loved conversation, and I guess he loved philosophy, studying Nietzsche and different guys. And he loved having these kinds of conversations. Now, this is before his conversion, before his baptism. He loved life, and he lived it to the fullest. He was struck by a car, fell off his motorcycle, and he was injured. Now, this is the tragedy in the movie, at least the second tragedy. Now, what was the first tragedy? The movie, basically, you can feel the pain of his mom and dad and his family losing Stephen at a young age, his brother. The movie doesn't go into how he died, but that he died. And you could see in the movie what they were trying to do is parallel the pain of loss with sort of an atheism theme, because that's what happens often. Parents blame God for the loss of their son. And God has nothing to do with it. You know, it's just like Jesus being crucified. What did he do? Nothing. We crucified him anyway. So you can see that in the movie, the way it's portrayed is because of tragedy, his mom and dad walked away from God. I'm not sure how true that is to life, but in the movie, it's portrayed that way. And that is a constant theme in my ministry for the last 30 years, or being in ministry for the last 30 years. I hear this all the time. Tragedy happens. people walk away from God. And guess what? He didn't do it. Does he allow it? Of course. Now, I can speak about this personally. When I was 3.5 years old, my dad died. Did God take my dad? Well, no. Someone would say, well, yeah, he took him. Well, no. God didn't take him. He died of lung failure. You see, God is not the author of death. He's the author of life. So death comes in other forms. Certainly, Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That's true. Yeah, what is our part? Right? What is the obese person's part? Why is he obese? Well, does he eat too much? Is there a physiology problem? You see, God handed over control right away, and Adam and Eve, or mankind, rejected him. We're not to blame God. But in this family scenario, that's what happened in the movie. They blamed God. Now, I don't think it happened that way in real life, but I like this take in the movie where they blamed God, and from that, they went into atheism and rejecting and or hating God. But Stu, through God, pulls him back, creates a trajectory for the whole family. Well, after he gets struck by a car, he has a close-to-death injury that led him to investigate, is God real or not? I had that same experience. I wasn't hit by a car, but I had to know at 19 years old, actually it was 17 years old, is God real? I went to search for the truth. That's what Fr Stu did. Well, he met a girl, and he was smitten with her, so much where she, as a Catholic girl, said, you got to get baptized if you want to marry me. So guess what? He gets baptized. And in the movie, this scene where, he's a really charming guy, played by Mark Wahlberg, very charming. And in the movie, he takes off his shirt in church, and he's really muscular and kind of showing off, and people are rolling their eyes. But that's who he was, right? That's the kind of guy he was. And he gets baptized for this girl. But guess what? Something happens to him during the process of baptism. He somehow met God. God found him during baptism. Well, that is the beginning of his whole turnaround. Some people use the word conversion, whatever. But that was the beginning of it. And I've said earlier in podcasts, if you listen to power, it's all about whose power are you under? Whose auspice are you under? The kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of hell? And I would say it's pretty clear he was under the kingdom of hell. And a lot of people are. But it's through our baptism that we can put on the light of Christ. Anyway, he felt called to be a priest after he was baptized. And so he, at some point, went to the Capuchin Friars in 1998, met Father Groeschel, made his way to Franciscan University, my alma mater, got a degree in philosophy. Now, if I would have stayed at Franciscan University, I was actually planning on getting a master's degree in Scripture, sacred Scripture. And I had sent my application, I was accepted, and I would have bumped into him. That would have been kind of cool. Hence, God called me out in 1996 to work in this church. So he had this hip surgery. Sometime after he got his degree studying for the Diocese of Helena, he had a hip surgery to remove a tumor. And after that, he was diagnosed with a muscle disease similar to Lou Gehrig's disease. And you see this in the movie play out. Now, Bishop Thomas, who is the bishop at the time, went back and forth. Should I ordain him or not? And you'll see that he does. That's his bio. And I want to talk about why the world needs a Fr Stu and what else I got out of the movie. The first thing I want to say is it doesn't matter who you are or where you've been. God is still working on you. There's this scene where two seminarians, Stu is one, and then there's another effeminate seminarian. They go into a jail cell. Now, the effeminate seminarian, he has this internal struggle. His dad wanted him to be a priest since he was a little boy, and he feels like he's forced to do it to please his dad. Well, this effeminate seminarian gets up and tries to talk to these men in jail, and he's struggling because he can't relate to them. So Stu in the movie says, at the time, he says, how many phone calls you guys get? Who are you going to call? You're going to call your mom? No, she's too disgraced with you. You're going to call your wife? No, she's off with another man. What about your kids? No, it's better that they just forget about you. You know who you can call? You call God. See, you don't need no permission from a guard to talk to God, he says. You can talk to God anytime you want to talk to, and he's working on you. Right now, he's working on you. And that is so true. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter whether you've been a Catholic your whole life, Christian your whole life, and walked away from the faith. At this moment, you can do something about it. Integrate. Get involved. See, it doesn't matter. Forget about the past. Move now. Do something right now. You know, you don't need permission from a guard to talk to God, right? Start talking to the Holy Spirit. Start talking to Yahweh right now. Of course, another thing that I mentioned earlier that I love about the movie is that it's raw, it's real, and it's honest. Now, if you're not used to vulgarity, and if it's going to offend you, you may want to reconsider going to the movie. But there's lots of vulgarity. Why? Because that's who he was. But this guy was real. And he was certainly not practicing his Christianity when he was in high school and in college, right? Playing football for Carroll College. He was not. They showed him in his true light. And there's lots of vulgarity. There's lots of inappropriateness. Because the movie was being fair to who the guy was. The movie doesn't go too far, but it's right up to the edge. I heard one commentator said there's so many blasphemies in the movie. Well, what's the intent of the movie? That's my question. The intent of the movie is to reach people who the church cannot. And you got to give kudos to Mark Wahlberg for that. I mean, he put millions of dollars into this movie. You know, I just read recently, Mark said his future is to do faith-based or movies that help people. He thinks there's a new chapter in his life. So yeah, is there inappropriateness? Yeah, but it was real. Here's the point. People become fake when they start practicing Christianity. You see them. You walk into them. In the Christian world, Catholics are mixed up in this too. You wear your hair a certain way, you dress a certain way, you shower 3 times a day, you talk a certain way, and you become plastic, superficial. The same thing over and over. And this happened to me early on. When I had my experience with God, I was hanging out with some, I would say born-again Christians, some Catholics, some not Catholic. And there's a certain disposition they put on. And I thought, well, this is what it means to be a Christian then. Got to get your bumper sticker. My bumper sticker said, read the Bible, free gift inside. See, that was how I was going to evangelize the world. Well, it took me about 6 months to actually hate this because I wasn't being honest with myself. This is not who I was. And that's what I don't like about modern day Christianity. It's so fake. People aren't real. They create a perception of who they are. And you know what? Men don't want it. I tell you, fellas, if you go to this movie, you will look at Fr Stu and say, okay, he's real. I could get to know this guy. And there's a lot of people who work in the church that aren't like Fr Stu, that you really want nothing to do with, but you have to mix with them because they're in your church. He was real. Some of you might say, well, Glenn, you're kind of hard, aren't you? You're kind of hard on the church. I'm sorry. It's true. It's what I don't like about Catholicism. There's so many effeminate priests and men working in the church and masculized women, and it's not working. I mean, try singing those songs, men. I watch all the time. Men won't sing. In general, men won't sing because the songs are effeminate. And this movie is in the face of the effeminate Catholic Church or the effeminate Christian church. Those are tough words, but they're honest. See, God took this normal guy and through his suffering and a right attitude made him into an instrument. That's what I love about Fr Stu. He was honest and real. Another thing to consider is he was an all-in kind of guy. He wasn't halfway in. He was all in. There's this point in this movie where, and I'm not sure if it happened, but there's this transaction where he was telling his girlfriend that he wanted to be a priest. And she said, I thought you brought me here to marry you. He said, no, I can't do that. See, he was all in. And there's another scene where the mom and the girlfriend hit heads. And the mom said, listen, if you had your eyes right, and I'm paraphrasing badly, but if you had your eyes, or if your head on straight, you would see that he's like a dog after a bone, and he's not going to stop until he gets that bone. You should know better. And she barks back and says, if you would have raised him right and not been under so much anxiety and putting your head in the sand of the death of your son, Stephen, he wouldn't be the man he is today. And all it's all true. But he was an all-in kind of guy. And there's a quote. He says, it ain't the giving up, it's the giving for. Like anything, it's the struggle that brings us closer to God. Of course, he's talking about his muscle disease. See, he used that muscle disease to grow in holiness. See, God did. God allows pain for us to grow in holiness. And you might say, that doesn't make sense. Right. Look at the cross. What makes sense of the crucifix? Jesus, who is God, dying on that cross. Does that make sense? Absolutely not. See, God's ways are not our ways. Things are not going to make sense. And that's one of the things you have to embrace in Christianity. Things are not going to make sense. God's going to take a guy like Fr Stu and use him. And this is the interesting juxtaposition of the longtime gentleman whose dad told him he was going to be a priest, and then Fr Stu. If you set them by each other, the longtime, seminarian says it doesn't make sense that God's going to use a guy like you. But in the end, he ends up respecting Fr Stu. So, should you go watch the movie? Yeah, definitely. I loved it. You should go see it. Everybody should go see the movie. Is it for high school students? I'm not so sure about that. Parents, you got to go with them. But yes, you should go see it. The movie will make you laugh. It might make you cry. You might be in tears. And if you're open, God will stir your heart. Let me end this way. Here's Fr Stu's quote. He says, my suffering is a gift from God. In this life, no matter how long it lasts, it's a momentary affliction preparing us for eternal glory. If you are suffering, there's a reason for that suffering. Did God do that to you? No. Does God allow it? Yes. With the right attitude in your suffering, you can be made a Catholic saint. Some of you might be thinking, there's no way. No way. Well, I bet you Fr Stu said the same thing. And look what happened to him. At the end of his life, in the movie, you see him in his wheelchair. And he hears confessions. And the lines are so long that they wrap around the facility that he lives in. Because God was using him. There's one gentleman who said he was the most like Christ out of all the people I've ever met. There's another point in the movie he says, it's not the body having a soul or spiritual experience. It's the soul having a human experience. God uses suffering to make holiness. Jesus suffered. Peter and all the apostles suffered. Martyrdom was everywhere in the early church. Why did Christianity grow? Because of martyrdom. The blood of martyrs. They laid themselves out, and the Romans killed them. See, the Romans couldn't believe that there were celibates. Why would anyone not want to be in a sexual marital relationship with concubines? They couldn't believe that Christians, some of them were celibates, madly in love with his God. See, that's a sign for us today, brothers and sisters. There are people who are madly in love with God, who don't want to get married, who just want to be in love. And I think that's what you're looking for. God bless you. Hey, thanks for listening to the Glen Gauer podcast, sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Mission Blueprint is a nonprofit ministry started by Glen and Jamie to sanctify the family. Our income is donation-based, and we need your help. Please support us financially by going to www.mission-blueprint.org and be a part of our financial team. Thank you, and may God strengthen the bars of your gate.